Some pilots set records.
Lewis Hamilton wins the Turkish Grand Prix and is a 7-time world champion.
Others define an era. But only one man did it all. Michael Schumacher not only dominated Formula One, he redefined it forever.
He had this power to make things bigger.
When I was growing up, my hero Michael was competing in Formula One.
He's a 7-time world champion and hero to many. He will always be the greatest, one of the greatest of all time.
But what made him so unique? Was it his ability to win with any car and in the most extreme conditions? His absolute dominance at Ferrari? Or the way that when everything seemed to fall apart, he always found a way to get back to the top? The truth is, Schumacher didn't become a legend by accident. His path was full of challenges. An unexpected debut, a decision that could have ruined his future, years of failures and frustrations, and a crash that almost ended his career. However, when it seemed like all was lost, something changed and one of the most dominant eras in the history of Formula One began. Today we're going to go over the 10 feats for which Michael Schumacher is considered by many to be the greatest in history. And the last one, it's such a legendary, unexpected, and unrepeatable moment that it left the whole world in shock. How did a complete unknown become the driver that every Formula One team wanted to sign in less than an hour? The story of Michael Schumacher began with an unlikely combination of coincidences, strategic lies, and above all, pure talent. In 1991, Bertrand Gachot, Jordan's main driver, was sentenced to 2 years in prison after an altercation with a taxi driver whom he sprayed with tear gas. This forced Eddie Jordan to urgently look for a replacement. It was then that Willy Weber, manager of a young 22-year-old German, saw a unique opportunity. He convinced the team that this driver knew Spa-Francorchamps, the circuit where the next race would take place, perfectly. What Jordan didn't know was that this young man, named Michael Schumacher, had never raced there. He hadn't even set foot on the circuit.
Schumacher was available this weekend. I've seen him in Formula 3, and the team likes giving young people a chance.
But when the German entered the Jordan, something changed. In his first Formula One qualifying, he managed to put a midfield car in a surprising 7th place, gaining more than a second over his teammate, Andrade Cesaris, an experienced driver. No one believed it. The rookie had worked magic on one of the calendar's toughest tracks. While everyone was shocked, Schumacher calmly commented,
"I'm very happy, but I have to say with these cars you can achieve these times."
However, on Sunday, luck was not on his side. During the formation lap, he detected a problem with the clutch, but the team couldn't fix it. So his debut ended before he even completed a single lap. What for many would have been a disastrous debut, for Schumacher was just the beginning of one of the most incredible stories in Formula One. Flavio Briatore, who was then the director of Benetton, was so impressed with his performance in qualifying that he didn't hesitate to fire Roberto Moreno to sign him as Nelson Piquet's teammate. That decision marked the beginning of one of the most legendary careers in the history of Formula One. And this was just a small demonstration of everything he was going to achieve in the future, especially at the circuit where it all began, Spa-Francorchamps. Some circuits have a special connection with certain drivers. And for Michael Schumacher, that place was always Spa. Belgium was where it all began in 1991. And a year later, he returned with more experience and a competitive car. What no one expected was what was about to happen. In qualifying, he achieved a solid 3rd place, behind Nigel Mansell's Williams, the most dominant car of the season, and Ayrton Senna's McLaren. But it was on race day where he truly showed what he was capable of. The Belgian Grand Prix started in dry conditions, but light rains soon made the track tricky. Still, the German kept 3rd with precise driving. However, on lap 30, he made a mistake, went off at a corner, and drove over the wet grass. Fortunately, he managed to rejoin right behind his teammate Martin Brando. That's when he made the decision that changed everything. He took the risk to pit and switch to dry tires, even though the track was still wet.
He decided to switch to dry tires. It was a great decision.
The strategy worked perfectly. Schumacher was flying on the track. 3 laps later, the race leader Nigel Mansell also came in to change tires. But when he came out of the pits, he found the young German ahead of him. From that moment on, the race became a battle against time. Mansell, with a clearly superior car, began to close the gap quickly, and it seemed that the dream of Schumacher's first victory was coming to an end. But fate had other plans. When Mansell was getting closer and closer, his engine began to fail without enough power to continue the chase. The Brit had to settle for second place, while Schumacher drove flawlessly towards the finish line. Thus, Michael Schumacher earned his first Formula One win.
Schumacher achieved his first victory in a Grand Prix, exactly 1 year after his debut in Formula One.
And that day, after 17 years, the German anthem played once again at the top of a podium in the highest category. Few drivers stand out when everything is against them. Ayrton Senna managed this in Brazil in 1991, when he achieved victory with a car stuck in 6th gear. 3 years later in Spain, Michael Schumacher faced a similar challenge. And although the result was different, the feat was recorded in the history of Formula One. Also, the context made that race even more special. The 1994 Spanish Grand Prix. This was the first competition after Ayrton Senna's tragic death in Imola, and his absence was felt throughout the paddock. However, that afternoon, Schumacher delivered a performance that reminded the whole world of Senna's legendary feat in São Paulo. In qualifying, he dominated with authority and beat Damon Hill and Mika Häkkinen by more than half a second. In the race, everything seemed to be under control until, completely unexpectedly, his gearbox failed and he got stuck in 5th gear. For many, this would have meant immediate retirement, but not for Schumacher. The German adapted to the car's limitations with impressive skill. He adjusted his racing lines to minimize time loss in the corners and maintained an incredible pace in almost impossible conditions. What he did was so extraordinary that he even managed to make a pit stop without the car coming to a complete stop. And he set off again using only 5th gear, a practically impossible maneuver. Though Damon Hill eventually passed him and won, Schumacher stayed strong in 2nd, finishing 24 seconds behind the Briton. The most surprising thing is that, despite gearbox problems during most of the race, he finished more than a minute ahead of the 3rd-place finisher, Mark Blundell. That day, Schumacher made it clear that even with a limited car, his talent was unmatched. That afternoon, Senna was remembered not only for Damon Hill's emotional speech, but also because Michael Schumacher showed a skill and determination that reflected the greatness of the Brazilian legend. It was a moment that cemented him as a worthy heir to the magic that Senna had left in Formula One. Due to his performances, consistency, and a controversial moment, he won his first world title at the end of 1994. However, that was not his last performance in extreme conditions, nor was it the most impressive. But first, if you think what Schumacher did was incredible, subscribe. For any driver, starting in 16th place at Spa-Francorchamps in the rain would be a nightmare. But for Michael Schumacher, it was the perfect opportunity to star in one of the most epic moments in Formula One history. The Kaiser arrived in Belgium as the championship leader with an 11-point advantage over Damon Hill. But his weekend started off terribly. From the first sessions, he looked very uncomfortable with the car, and during practice, he pushed his Benetton to the limit.
Training. Michael Schumacher fährt in der Malmö die Kurve zu weit über die Randsteine.
The result was a disaster. The car was destroyed just a few hours before the second qualifying session. So the team worked intensely to repair it, and they managed to do it, but there was a big problem. Qualifying had already started. During the first few minutes, the track was dry, but just before Schumacher went out to set his time, it started to rain. Despite his efforts, he couldn't set a competitive time and was relegated to 16th position. With heavy rain on Sunday, the comeback seemed like an impossible mission, but from the start, it was clear that Spa would witness something extraordinary. In only 2 laps, the Benetton driver gained 6 positions to reach 10th place. His talent for driving in the rain allowed him to gain positions quickly, while the lead of the race changed constantly due to retirements and mechanical failures. On lap 15, The German took the lead of the race when Damon Hill pitted to refuel and switched to dry tires. 3 laps later, Schumacher did the same and the Briton regained the lead with a 14-second advantage. But everything changed in an instant. The rain came back heavily and Hill went into the pits again to put on wet tires. At that moment, Schumacher had 2 options. Stop and secure second place or risk everything to fight for the win. True to form, he went all in and stuck with dry tires. The performance difference was huge. Hill was 6 seconds per lap faster than Schumacher, and in just a few laps, he caught up to the German. What followed was one of the most memorable battles in the history of Formula One. The Benetton driver fiercely defended against a much faster Williams, closing every gap and pushing his car to the limit in tough conditions. After several attempts, Hill tried to overtake him at Lecombe, but the cars made contact. However, the battle continued with the same intensity, with Schumacher taking maximum risks at every corner. Finally, on lap 24, Hill tried to overtake him at the same spot where they had made contact, but this time the German couldn't hold him off and ended up off the track. With the road clear, the Briton began to pull away and it seemed that victory was out of reach for Schumacher. But once again, Spa had other plans. The rain suddenly stopped and now it was the German who had the tire advantage. Schumacher showed all his talent and closed the gap to Hill lap after lap until he finally caught up and overtook him. Faced with this, Hill had no choice but to pit for dry tires, but just when the race seemed decided, everything changed again. The rain came back heavily on lap 29, and race control brought out the safety car, forcing both drivers to pit again to change tires. With 12 laps left, the safety car exited, leaving Schumacher first and Hill second, setting the stage for their earlier battle to resume. However, even though they didn't know it at the time, the result was already decided. During his pit stop, Hill exceeded the pit lane speed limit, earning a stop-and-go penalty. In the end, Schumacher crossed the finish line with a 19-second lead and achieved a historic victory, his second at Spa-Francorchamps.
Victory for Michael Schumacher and Benetton Renault.
That day, he showed why Spa was his favorite circuit, and how, even in the toughest conditions, his talent was unmatched. At the 1995 European Grand Prix, Michael Schumacher faced both his rivals on the track and the pressure of a contested championship, along with racing before his home crowd. That afternoon's events drove all of Germany crazy. Schumacher arrived in the middle of a dispute with Damon Hill, the same rival from whom he controversially took the previous year's championship.
Hill overtakes. Oh, out goes Schumacher. The German is out of the Australian Grand Prix.
The Benetton driver started from 3rd position, behind the Williams cars of Hill and Coulthard. So he knew he needed more than just speed to win. The track was wet, but it was starting to dry, which added an extra challenge. And this is what happened at the first corner.
A confusing race start. David Coulthard, Michael Schumacher, and Eddie Irvine stay in 3rd.
Schumacher capitalized on Hill's slow start to pass him and take 2nd place behind Coulthard. When the leaders made their first pit stop, an unexpected protagonist appeared. Jan Alesi, who had not yet pitted, overtook everyone and took the lead of the race. Meanwhile, Hill began to close the gap to Schumacher until he caught up with him. The German defended himself against Hill's attacks, but the Williams was faster and eventually overtook him. However, the battle was not over yet. Shortly after, the Briton made a mistake and went off the track, which allowed Schumacher to regain the position. Despite having lost time in their battle, both managed to overtake David Coulthard when he started having problems with the car. Thus, Coulthard was out of the fight for victory. But, as I mentioned, the battle between Schumacher and Hill made them lose a lot of time, which created a completely unexpected scenario. Alesi was leading the race with a 45-second advantage. On lap 34, Alesi and Schumacher made their second pit stop. The Frenchman took on enough fuel to make it to the end, while the German still had a third stop pending. Shortly after, fate once again played a crucial role.
In the situation where he is now second behind Schumacher in the championship, he spins out and he's out! Damon Hill is out!
Damon Hill had an incident and is out of the race. Victory seemed destined for Alesi, unless Schumacher managed to catch up to him after his last pit stop, although the chances were slim. But if there was a chance, Schumacher was going to try. especially racing in front of his home crowd. With less fuel load, the German began an impressive comeback and closed the huge gap with laps almost 2 seconds faster than the Ferraris. After a great effort, he managed to catch up to Alesi and pressured him for several laps, even forcing the Frenchman to lock up his tires several times. After trying every possible way, the German driver decided to take a risk with just over 2 laps to go at turn 11. He made a late braking move on the outside in an extremely risky maneuver that could have ended with both of them out.
Side by side in the chicane, and Schumacher makes it.
Alesi tried to defend but had to give him space to avoid a collision. Finally, Schumacher crossed the finish line as the winner and unleashed madness at the circuit and all over Germany. And it was thanks to performances like those in Belgium and Germany that in 1995, Michael Schumacher became a 2-time Formula One world champion. At the end of that year, Michael had 2 options: play it safe and stay with Benetton to go for his 3rd title with a competitive car, or take a chance by joining a struggling Ferrari. Aiming to restore them to the top and earn eternal glory, his choice was obvious. When Michael Schumacher joined Ferrari in 1996, he found a team in crisis and a car well behind its rivals. But at the Spanish Grand Prix under torrential rain, he showed that even with a mediocre car, the greatness of a driver can change everything. That day, in Montmeló, Schumacher delivered one of the most impressive performances of his career. However, the start couldn't have been worse. At the start, the Ferrari suffered clutch problems, which left him practically motionless for several seconds and made him lose many positions. But the German wasn't the only one with difficulties. Before the end of the first lap, 6 cars had already retired, including his teammate Eddie Irvine. Despite the bad start, Schumacher began to recover quickly on lap 9. He caught up to Jean Alesi, the man he had beaten at last year's European Grand Prix, and replaced at Ferrari for the 1999 season. What followed was a battle in extreme conditions, where the German once again showed why he was considered the best in the rain. After overtaking Alesi with a flawless move, he continued his comeback. Just a few laps later, it was Jacques Villeneuve's turn, who was leading with his Williams, the most dominant car of the year. But not even a Williams could stop Schumacher that day. With a perfectly calculated move, the German took the lead and never let it go. While his rivals struggled to stay on track, Schumacher flew through the rain, setting a blistering pace. The dominance was absolute. He was gaining 3 seconds per lap over his pursuers and built a 45-second lead over the second-place driver. Schumacher's advantage was so overwhelming that of the 6 cars that managed to finish the race, only 2, Alesi and Villeneuve, were able to do so on the same lap as him. That victory was not only his first with Ferrari, but it also marked the beginning of a new era. The German driver arrived to transform the team and challenge Williams' dominance. The message was clear to all of Formula One. Even with an inferior car, Michael Schumacher was unstoppable. That day, the legend of Schumacher at Ferrari was born, the combination that redefined the history of the sport. That year, Michael earned 2 more wins, even without a competitive car. That's why his victories in Belgium and Italy became essential to his legacy. At the 1998 Hungarian Grand Prix, Michael Schumacher delivered a performance that defied the odds and made it clear that the fastest driver isn't always the one with the best car. For that season, the endless hours of work by Schumacher and Ferrari were beginning to pay off. The team already had a more competitive car, surpassing Williams, who had dominated in recent years. But then, something completely unexpected happened. McLaren had built by far the fastest car and was dominating the championship, with Mika Häkkinen as the favorite for the title after winning 6 of the first 11 races. However, Schumacher, with an inferior car but pure talent, stayed in the fight thanks to his consecutive victories in Canada, France, and Great Britain. He knew that in Hungary, speed alone wasn't enough. He had to be perfect. Starting from 3rd, he pressured the McLarens from the start until his first pit stop. Then, Coulthard had a chance to pull away but made a mistake. He went off track and lost time, letting the Ferrari get closer. While this was happening, something happened that changed the race's fate. Ross Brown, Ferrari's strategist, changed the plan. Instead of 2 pit stops, Schumacher would make 3. A decision that seemed crazy. To make matters worse, a catastrophic pit stop for Häkkinen made him lose a lot of time and allowed the Ferrari driver to overtake him. From that point on, Brown's strategy made more sense. But for it to work, Schumacher had to do the impossible. Run 30 laps at qualifying pace, lap after lap, with no margin for error. Not long before, a driver of Coulthard's caliber had failed when trying the same thing over far fewer laps. But the big difference was that now the one who was going to try it was Michael Schumacher. And what happened next was simply impressive. Schumacher set 15 consecutive lap records after his second stop, which caused panic at McLaren, who had no idea what to do. Ron Dennis and a young Adrian Newey tried to react by ordering Häkkinen, who had a slow pace, to let Coulthard pass so he could try to catch up to Schumacher. But they missed a crucial detail. Schumacher had been so fast in those 15 laps that he had enough of a lead to pit, make his third stop, and come back out in first position.
Look back, where are the McLarens? They're behind him. They're behind him.
With the race nearly won, anyone else would have eased off. But what did Schumacher do? He kept breaking lap records. How many? Another 15 in a row, all the way to the checkered flag. That day, Schumacher didn't just win. He made an unforgettable point. The car matters, but the real difference comes from the driver. After practically rebuilding Ferrari, Michael Schumacher had everything to become champion in 1999. But a brutal accident at Silverstone changed the course of his season and possibly his career. On the first lap, a brake failure in his Ferrari caused him to crash into the barriers.
Michael Schumacher broke his leg here in 1999, crashing into the gravel.
The effect was devastating. The German suffered a fracture of the tibia and fibula in his right leg, which kept him out of competition for 6 races, and it practically ended his hopes of winning the title. While he was recovering, the championship went on, and against all odds, Eddie Irvine, his teammate, found himself fighting for the title against Mika Häkkinen. In addition, Ferrari had the chance to win the Constructors' Championship for the first time in 16 years. Schumacher's return for the final 2 races was crucial. The problem was that his replacement, Mika Salo, was only able to get 2 podiums in 6 races, and those were the only times he managed to score points. In early October, Ferrari held a test at Mugello to assess the German's physical condition. It was a disaster. He could barely complete 15 laps before losing control of the car and crashing. Though unharmed, it was clear he wasn't ready to compete. That day, Ferrari announced he wouldn't race for the rest of the season. Later, the German confirmed this to the media, saying his physical condition wasn't ideal for top performance, and that he was still carrying the psychological weight of the accident at Silverstone. Against all expectations, he got back in the Ferrari at the Malaysian Grand Prix. Despite doubts about his physical and mental condition, he achieved one of the most impressive pole positions in history, beating Häkkinen by almost a full second. During the race, he showed why he was considered one of the greatest of all time. He finished in second place and helped Ferrari stay in the fight for the championship. At Suzuka in the season's final race, he impressed again and took another second place. However, Irving couldn't surpass Häkkinen and lost the driver's title by just 2 points. Despite this, Ferrari managed to be crowned Constructors' Champion for the first time since 1983, marking the definitive return of the Italian team to the top of Formula One. And that comeback wouldn't have been possible without Schumacher's incredible feat. Ferrari, the most iconic team in Formula One, had gone more than 2 decades without a driver's title. But on October 8th, 2000, Michael Schumacher, with tears in his eyes and with the determination of a champion, he put an end to that long wait and began one of the most dominant eras in the history of the sport. The championship was an intense battle between Schumacher and Häkkinen. McLaren aimed for a 3rd straight driver's title, while Ferrari relied on its German star to end their drought. Following a crucial United States win and Häkkinen's retirement, Schumacher reached Suzuka with a chance to be Ferrari's first champion since Jody Scheckter in 1979. Pole position was his, but the race began with an unexpected twist that complicated everything. At the start, Hakkinen overtook him at the first corner and with a blistering pace pulled out an 0.8 advantage before completing the first lap. Everything seemed to be going McLaren's way, especially after a slow pit stop by Ferrari caused Schumacher to lose even more time. However, Michael's greatness was not only in his speed, but also in his ability to stay calm under pressure. Before the second pit stop, Hakkinen lost time in traffic and pitted on lap 37, and came out almost 26 seconds behind the German. Until that moment, Ferrari had been replicating McLaren's strategy. But then Ross Brown and Schumacher made a decision that defined the championship. Just like so many times before, they decided to risk it all. The German stayed on track for 3 more laps to avoid traffic and gain time before his stop. But for this to work, he had to fly, and he did. In those 3 laps, he set impressive times when he finally came into the pits. Ferrari's flawless work put him 4.1 seconds ahead of Hakkinen. The title was decided, the German maintained the gap, and not even the light rain in the last laps could prevent the inevitable. He crossed the finish line as the winner of the Grand Prix and, most importantly, as world champion for the 3rd time.
And to win the 2000 Japanese Grand Prix and the World Championship for the 3rd time.
Tears escaped him as he thanked his team over the radio.
You're great, Ross. You're great, Ross. All of you, team. Oh my God.
So many years of sacrifice, so many defeats, so much pain. It had all been worth it. That day, Ferrari returned to the top of Formula One, and Michael Schumacher became the hero who brought glory back to Maranello. But this was just the beginning. In the following years, Ferrari and Schumacher built an era of absolute dominance, achieving 5 consecutive titles and establishing themselves as the most successful duo in the history of the sport. Additionally, in 2003, he surpassed Juan Manuel Fangio in titles. And in 2004, he became the most decorated driver ever, winning 7 world championships. In 2006, he announced his retirement from Formula One at 37 years old with 91 victories and 7 world titles. And so ended one of the most successful and legendary careers in the history of Formula One. Or at least that's how it seemed. Until a few years later, everything changed. Michael Schumacher's Formula One career appeared over in 2006, but Mercedes convinced him to return in 2010 for his last dance, and a few years later, in 2012, Formula One witnessed the end of an era. The man who had rewritten the history books of motorsport said goodbye to the tracks for good. But before doing so, he left one last display of greatness that remained engraved in the memory of all the fans. His return with Mercedes to Formula One was not as many expected. For 3 seasons, the German team struggled to compete and had no major achievements. But the talent and experience of the 7-time champion were key to building the foundations of what, years later, would become a dynasty. And although the results didn't always go his way, Schumacher still had flashes of magic. At the 2012 Monaco Grand Prix, the German achieved an exceptional pole position. With this achievement, he showed that his skill was still intact. But a penalty carried over from the previous Grand Prix relegated him to 6th place on the grid. Unfortunately, his race ended in retirement. But that qualifying lap reminded the world who Michael Schumacher was. His last great feat came weeks later, at the European Grand Prix in Valencia. The German couldn't even make it to Q3 and had to start from 12th position.
Their confidence went beyond a lackluster qualifying session.
True to his style, he took a different approach by starting on medium tires, while the top 10 chose soft compounds. This kept him from the initial chaos, but forced him to fight his way back against all odds. Then, something unexpected happened.
Oh God, I might get a slap on the wrist for that too.
When the safety car appeared after the accident, Schumacher moved into the top 10 and began to prove why he was considered one of the best in history. Overtake after overtake, he passed Rosberg, Weber, and others, while he was lapping 2 seconds faster than his rivals. On the penultimate lap, he passed Hülkenberg and secured 5th place, but fate intervened. Pastor Maldonado crashed into Hamilton, knocking him out of the race and paving the way for Schumacher. The German crossed the finish line in third place and became the oldest driver to stand on the podium since Jack Brabham in 1970 that day. Michael Schumacher not only said goodbye with one more record, but also left a reminder of his genius, his perseverance, and his love for motorsport. Thus, in his final chapter, he said goodbye again, holding every possible Formula One record, regarded by many as the greatest ever. There are those who believe that the greatest of all time is Senna, so watch this video and discover the 10 feats that make Ayrton Senna the best in history.